5th grade Miss Rowe here. So I am on DCPS packet week 1, day 4. So together we are going to outline the second option for your final task. Write a short story telling how women, like the Daughters of Liberty, supported the cause for freedom. So first I'm looking at our note catcher, and I see that my 2 guiding questions, the first, what is your product task asking you to do? So looking back at my prompt, write a short story telling how women like the Daughters of Liberty supported the cause for freedom. I know that I am being asked to write a short story that's really focused on how these women supported freedom during this time. Notice here I abbreviated Daughters of Liberty to DOL. I'm going to be doing that throughout our outlining process in order to save my time. So I'm just going to remember that DOL stands for Daughters of Liberty. So now, my second guiding question, which evidence from the text will you use? I'm going to focus on Act 2 for my story. You are welcome to focus on any of the 4 acts from this text. And if you're focusing on a different act, you can use my video as an exemplar, but remember you're pulling details from the act that you are focusing on. Each act has a different setting and different characters, so it's important that you're really closely reading the text if you are pulling from a different act. So before I get started with pulling my evidence, I am going to go back to the text and reread my text to make sure that I have a clear understanding of what I'm going to be including in my story. So here I have Act 2. I'm going to independently read Act 2 very closely in order to make sure I have a strong understanding of the story. You can pause your screen here and read this screen to reread Act 2. You can read in your packet, or you can go back to my video of the read aloud. So go ahead and reread the act that you will be covering, and then come back to our video and join us here. So what evidence from the text will I use? First, I need to include my setting. So I know that my setting is 1776 in Providence, Rhode Island, because that's the setting that's established in my act. It's very clear when I'm reading a play. Next, I need to know the background. So after rereading, the very important background that I need to include in my story is that the Stamp Act was passed by the British. So stamps had to appear on all official documents. They cost money, so it was a form of tax, which we know that the Patriots were very against taxes without representation. And the Daughters of Liberty, my main characters, were outraged by this tax. Next, I need to include my characters. The 3 characters that I need to be sure to include in my story are Charity Spencer, India Bradford, and Abigail Good. I know this because they all had dialogue in the act that I am writing about. And finally, I need to include my events. So the events that happened in the act of my play were that the Daughters of Liberty decided not to buy the stamps. Abigail said they should make sure that no one else buys them either. The daughters work together to decide that in order to make sure no one is able to buy stamps, they need to destroy the stamps when they arrive at the harbor. So my act finishes when the daughters coordinate with the Sons of Liberty to make sure the stamps are destroyed. So that's where my act leaves off. My story is going to cover the destroying of these stamps. Okay, so here we have our story arc. This should look familiar to you. This is how we outline a narrative writing piece. We have our beginning, middle, and end. So this is different from a quick outline because it sets us up to really tell a compelling story instead of to write a paragraph that would be more explanatory. So thinking about our purpose for writing, this outline makes sense. So let's start with our beginning. Looking back to our note catcher, I know in my beginning I need to establish my setting, my characters, and my background. So I'm going back to my note catcher, and I can see that my characters, will be the Daughters of Liberty, India, Charity, and Abigail. And again, I abbreviated Daughters of Liberty to save myself some time. My setting is 1766, Providence, Rhode Island. And my background is that the Stamp Act was passed, the Daughters of Liberty are outraged, and they decide to destroy British stamps. So my beginning pretty much covers what I read in Act 2. Now my middle and end, I have a little bit more creative liberty to imagine what happens next. Because I know the act gave me my problem, it didn't necessarily give me my solution. So that's where I get to be creative as an author and create that solution in a way that makes sense. So now moving on to my middle. I know in my middle, I need to talk about our problem, how our problem is getting worse, and this focal point, the climax of our story, the most dramatic part of our story is going to happen in this middle section. So at this point, I need to brainstorm what happens next because it's not covered in my act. This is where you as a writer can get creative, or you can use my shell as an outline for how your story might sound too. So my setting changes. I'm moving to the Rhode Island harbor. The harbor is the edge of the water where boats will dock. This makes sense because I know that the Daughters of Liberty are going to be at the harbor in order to confront the British and destroy the stamps. I know my people are going to be Daughters of Liberty and also other patriots that they're partnering with. And I know their actions are going to be to approach the British soldiers and demand the stamps. This next part is where I'm getting creative. In my story, India, one of my characters, will grab the stamps and race to throw them into the ocean in order to destroy them. So this racing to throw them in the ocean, this is my climax. This is the most exciting part of my story and how our problem of the Stamp Act is solved. Okay, so now we're moving on to end. We need to talk about how the problem is solved and what happens next. So in my story, the Daughters of Liberty and the Patriots rush to escape the British soldiers. They have to run away very quickly because I'm imagining these soldiers are probably very angry that these expensive stamps were destroyed. They return to the Daughters of Liberty headquarters. So I have another change in setting. And then I'm going to finish my story with the feelings that these patriots are feeling. The Daughters of Liberty both feel joyful that they fought for their liberty, but afraid of what will happen next. And there we have our completed outline. Remember, you can get creative, particularly with your middle and your end of what happens. Just be sure that the events that you are generating make sense for your characters and your setting. Happy writing! Make sure you have a complete outline, and then next time we will work together to write our short story.